Идите нахуй.
War exposes the darkest corners of humanity. And in this war, Russia has crossed every line that defines it. On November 3rd, 2025, the world witnessed an act so cruel, so inhumane, that it shook even those who thought they had seen everything in this brutal conflict. On November 3rd, 2025, the world witnessed a moment of horror. Not on a battlefield, but on a quiet village road in Ukraine's Kharkiv region. An elderly couple, weary from months of shelling, decided it was time to leave. Their home had become unlivable. The sound of artillery echoed in the distance, and the hum of drones lingered constantly above. They carried little with them. A few essentials, a sense of hope, and a simple white flag. That flag was meant to protect them, the universal symbol of surrender, peace, and innocence. The husband guided his old bicycle along the dirt path. His wife walked beside him. Their dog trotted ahead, tail low, sensing the danger. But nearby, hidden among the grass, a Russian drone was waiting. It was a loitering munition, a weapon designed not for precision, but for annihilation. Somewhere far away, its operator watched the couple through a camera feed, and then, with a single command, the drone rose from the ground, locked on, and dove. The explosion shattered the silence. The man fell instantly, the white flag slipping from his hand and landing in the dust. His dog cried out, wounded, refusing to leave his side. Moments later, the woman ran toward him, screaming his name. She wasn't thinking about survival. She only wanted to reach him, but the drone operator was still watching. Another drone appeared, circling overhead. The woman began to pray, crossing herself as she approached her husband's body. Then another strike, another flash, and then silence. 2 lives, ended in seconds. A home, left behind forever. A dog, lying still beside its owners. When Ukraine released the footage captured by their own reconnaissance drone, the world was left speechless. The video spread across international media within hours. Human rights groups. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't collateral damage. It was the calculated targeting of civilians, people who posed no threat, people who carried nothing but a white flag. But what happened next would show that every act of cruelty, every drop of innocent blood, comes with consequences. Because just 48 hours later, Ukraine responded, not with words, but with fire. The operation was called Flamingo. It was Ukraine's most daring counterstrike yet, a coordinated attack designed not only to cripple Russia's military infrastructure, but to send a chilling message straight to the heart of Moscow. For months, Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking Russia's drone production facilities. They discovered one of the Kremlin's largest drone assembly plants located deep inside Russia, a massive industrial complex that produced the very same killer drones used to terrorize Ukrainian civilians. It was a symbol of Putin's war machine. On the night of November 5th, Ukraine launched Flamingo. It began quietly, with long-range drones taking off from hidden bases. They flew low to avoid radar, crossing hundreds of kilometers into Russian airspace. But this time, they didn't come alone. Moments later, waves of precision-guided missiles followed, launched from land and sea. Within minutes, Russian air defense systems lit up the skies. Sirens wailed across Moscow, Belgorod, and Bryansk. Panic spread as people ran for shelter. But Ukraine's drones were moving too fast, too unpredictably. The first explosions hit a drone factory near Ryazan, a direct strike that turned the entire facility into a fireball visible for miles. Then came the second wave, targeting oil refineries, power plants, and communication hubs. For the first time since the war began, Moscow itself went dark. Massive power outages swept through the Russian capital. Over 250 regions across western Russia lost electricity in a single night. Train systems stopped. Gas stations shut down. Even the Kremlin's own district experienced blackouts. Videos on social media showed entire neighborhoods shrouded in darkness, with only the eerie glow of emergency lights flickering in the distance. Ukrainian officials later confirmed that Flamingo was designed not to kill civilians, but to paralyze the machinery of war, to cut power to drone command centers, to halt production lines, and to strike at the heart of the very system responsible for atrocities like the attack on the elderly couple. And it worked. Russian media tried to downplay the attack, calling it a temporary technical failure. But everyone knew the truth. Flamingo had plunged Moscow into darkness, both literally and symbolically. For ordinary Russians, it was a wake-up call. The war that had been sold to them as a distant, special operation was now right outside their window. They could no longer pretend it wasn't real. And in the silence of that blackout, something else began to rise: anger. For the past 3 years, Putin's regime had relied on fear and censorship to keep the public quiet. Every protest was crushed. Every dissenter was jailed. But repression has a limit, and that limit has finally been reached. In the days following the Flamingo strikes, videos began surfacing from cities across Russia. Groups of young people gathering in town squares, singing banned songs, waving anti-war banners, and chanting slogans that hadn't been heard since the fall of the Soviet Union. But one video stood out from all the rest. It came from St. Petersburg, Putin's own hometown. On the icy streets of Nevsky Prospect, hundreds of young Russians gathered at midnight. They didn't shout slogans or wave flags. Instead, they sang. The melody was unmistakable: Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. It was more than music, it was defiance. Swan Lake holds a haunting place in Russian history. It was the melody played on state television during the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It symbolized the end of an empire. For years, the Kremlin had banned public performances of the piece, fearing its association with rebellion and regime change. Yet now, in 2025, that very song echoed again, on the same streets where revolutions once began. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. St. Petersburg is not just any city. It's the birthplace of Russian Revolution, the place where the Tsar was overthrown, where Lenin's movement began, and where the Soviet Empire's story both began and ended. When protests erupt there, they are not merely protests, they are omens. Putin understood that better than anyone. He had spent his early career in this city as a young KGB officer, learning how revolutions start. And now, he was watching the ghosts of those revolutions return. The Kremlin responded swiftly and brutally. Riot police surrounded the demonstrators. Hundreds were detained. The FSB began tracking social media posts, identifying anyone who had shared videos of the protests. Even teenagers were arrested for anti-state activities. But it was too late. The spark had already spread. Within days, similar gatherings appeared in Moscow, Kazan, and Yekaterinburg. Young Russians, many of whom had grown up under Putin and knew no other leader, began to publicly question the war, the censorship, and the lies. The more the state tried to suppress them, the louder they became. This is the nightmare every dictator dreads, not an external enemy, but an awakening within. Inside the Kremlin, fear turned into paranoia. Reports began leaking that the FSB had opened a criminal investigation into a supposed coup plot involving exiled oligarchs and former generals. The regime claimed these figures were coordinating with the protesters to overthrow Putin. Whether true or not, it revealed one thing. The fear inside Russia's highest offices was real, and that fear was justified, because the protests were no longer about Ukraine. They were about Russia itself, about decades of lies, corruption, and stolen futures. For a generation raised on propaganda, the blackout caused by Flamingo was the moment the illusion broke. They saw their government not as a protector, but as the cause of their suffering. In schools and universities, students began refusing to stand for the national anthem. Bands started performing banned anti-war songs. Social media filled with videos of Russians lighting candles for victims of the war, not for soldiers, but for civilians. The regime tried everything to stop it. They shut down the internet in multiple regions. They declared emergency laws. They arrested local journalists. But repression no longer worked like it once did. The more they tried to hide the truth, the more people went looking for it. In many ways, it was the Streisand effect on a national scale. The Kremlin banned Swan Lake. Now thousands were singing it. They censored anti-war bands. Now their songs were viral across TikTok and Telegram. Putin's propaganda machine had lost control of the narrative. Even state television anchors, once the obedient mouthpieces of the regime, began showing cracks. Some quietly resigned, Others avoided mentioning the word victory. Instead, they spoke vaguely of difficult times and necessary sacrifices. Meanwhile, Ukraine continued its campaign with precision and discipline. Its strikes targeted military sites, not civilians, a sharp contrast to Russia's strategy of terror. International support for Kyiv surged. Western nations accelerated the delivery of air defense systems and long-range missiles. Putin's allies, from Beijing to Tehran, began to distance themselves, fearing his regime might collapse. The Russian economy, already battered by sanctions, began to crumble under the weight of war spending and blackouts. The ruble plunged to record lows. Energy exports fell. The very industries that had once made Russia powerful were now falling apart. And through it all, one haunting image spread across the internet: young Russians standing in the snow, holding candles, singing Swan Lake. For many outside observers, it was a moment of déjà vu, a reflection of 1991, when the Soviet Union's grip finally broke. Back then, it wasn't the West or the army that ended the empire. It was the people, ordinary citizens who decided they had had enough. History, it seemed, was repeating itself. Putin, once the strongman of the 21st century, was now trapped in the same historical cycle he swore to prevent. His obsession with restoring the glory of the Soviet past had instead resurrected its downfall. The same melodies, the same cities, the same ghosts, all returning to haunt him. And perhaps the greatest irony of all, the more he tried to crush Ukraine's will, the more he destroyed his own. As winter deepens and Russia struggles with power outages, protests, and paranoia, one thing has become clear. This war is no longer just about territory. It is about truth versus fear, light versus darkness. The Flamingo operation may have started as a military response, but its real impact was psychological. It revealed that even in the face of overwhelming brutality, resistance can still find its voice, in a drone strike, in a song, in a whisper of defiance. Putin's drones killed an innocent couple carrying a white flag. But in doing so, he unleashed something far more dangerous than any army: the conscience of his own people. And now, as the lights go out across Moscow, the sound that fills the silence is not the hum of drones or the roar of propaganda. It's the faint, defiant echo of Swan Lake, playing once again as history repeats itself.